to the sewing tutorial for the sleeveless Eleonora dress. I will be using a crinkled cotton. This fabric was very kindly gifted to me by Blackbird Fabrics. It's lightweight, but at the same time it's not sheer, so it's perfect for this kind of pattern. Okay, let's get started. Transfer all your markings and notches to your fabric pieces. As I will be making view C, I have transferred 3 rows for the shirred waist. I have also prepared my shoulder straps by pressing them in the middle. Make sure that you have transferred the notches for the gathers. Cut 4 ties for the waist and the neckline. I have also prepared the neckline bias binding by pressing it in the middle. We are now ready to start sewing. Mark out the placement for your 2 buttonholes at the waist. This should be on the right side of your fabric. I also recommend that you use some fusible interfacing on the inside of your garments. This is to make sure that your buttonholes last longer. Make a swatch and make sure that your finished buttonhole measures 1 centimeter. This is what your finished buttonholes looks like when they have been pressed. I have also prepared the buttonholes for the neckline bias binding. Place the front and back bodice pieces right sides together. Pin the side seams and sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Overlock the seam allowance and press towards the back. When you have joined your side seams of the bodice, overlock the seam allowance and press towards the back. Take your shoulder straps and press them in the middle and make sure that you have transferred the notches. Sew a basting stitch between the notches. Gather your shoulder straps. This is what your finished gathered shoulder strap should look like. The gathered part will be sewn into the armhole of the bodice. Match the notch for the ruffle to the edge of the armhole. Place the ruffle right side to right side with the bodice and pin in place the whole way around. Sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance between the notches. Press your armhole ruffle up and away from your bodice. Make sure that your seam allowance is pressed down towards the inside of the garment. Finish the seam allowance and stitch as close as possible to the edge of the seam allowance. This is to make sure that your armhole ruffle will stand up. Finish your shoulder straps by placing them right side to right side. Sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance. This is what your finished shoulder straps are going to look like. The raw edges will be enclosed to the inside. With the right sides of your bodice facing you, match the bias tape for the neckline with the front of your bodice. I have already pressed the inside of my bias tape for the upcoming steps, but you can also choose to overlock these edges. Make sure that you have your center front marked out. Match the center front of your bias tape with the center front of your bodice. Pin all the way around the neckline and the shoulder straps. When you reach the intersection of the shoulder strap, you are just going to continue to pin as usual. Pivot the shoulder strap if needed. Make sure that you match your seam allowance and that your shoulder straps are still folded. When your bias tape is meeting at the center back, fold down both edges and press with your fingernails. Match both folds right side to right side and pin in the fold. Sew where you have pinned the bias tape. Cut off any excess of the bias tape. Press your bias tape open. Continue to pin the bias tape to your neckline. Press your bias tape channel up and away from your bodice. Make sure that your seam allowance is pressed towards the up and will be enclosed in the bias tape. Fold your bias tape towards the bodice and make sure again that your seam allowance is on the inside. From the right side of your garment, pin in the fold. Make sure that your bias tape is also pinned. For the next step, you are going to stitch in the ditch from the right side of your garment, and you will also stitch down the inside of your bias tape. Press your neckline channel, sew another row 1 centimeter away. Your neckline channel is now finished. As I will be making the sheared waist, I will now sew 3 rows with elastic on the right side of my garment. This is what my finished sheared waist looks like. Take your ties and fold them right side to right side. You're going to sew with 6 mm seam allowance from the folded edge. This is what your ties should look like when you have sewn them. I use a loop turner for my ties, but you can turn them right side out any way you like. Press your ties. I find that this gives them a more professional look. Walk the tie through the channel using a safety pin. This is what your bodice looks like with the tie inserted into the neckline. For the last step, you want to sew down a triangle on the inside of your armhole ruffle. Make sure that your side seams are laying flat. Measure 1.5 centimeter from the folded edge and place a pin in the ruffle only. This is what your triangle on your armhole ruffle will look like. As I don't want any puckers, I have not backstitched my seam. I will tie off my thread tails and cut them off. You want to fold the triangle to one side and hand stitch the edges down so that the side lies flat. This is what it looks like when I have hand stitched the edges down. This will make sure that your armhole ruffle lies flat towards your body, and it will give it a more professional look. I will be making my skirt using the full width of the fabric and cutting 2 panels. I will not be making any pockets. Pin the side seams of your skirt. Sew the side seams of your skirt with 1 cm seam allowance. Overlock the seam allowance and press the seam towards the back. Sew a basting stitch on your waist within your seam allowance of 1.3 cm. Gather the basting stitch. Finish your hem by pressing 1 cm up. Press another 5 cm. Stitch close to the edge the whole way around. With the right side of the bodice and the skirt, you are going to pin the waist the whole way around. You will sew the waist with 1.3 cm seam allowance. Make sure to not cut away any seam allowance, as this will be used for your waist channel later. Overlock your seam allowance and press towards the bodice. Stitch as close as possible on your seam allowance to finish your waist channel. This is what your finished waist channel will look like from the right side of your fabric. Walk the tie through the waist channel using a safety pin. Your sleeveless Eleonora dress is now finished. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Follow me on Instagram at Silversaga Patterns. Please also subscribe and like this video so that I can continue making sewing tutorials. I will see you soon. Bye!